Kyle Harrison graduated as the best left-handed pitching prospect in baseball. Hayden Birdsong has a wicked arsenal and throws really, really hard, and yet it's another young pitcher that the Giants have who looks to be their fifth starter, most likely going into the season.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and RotoGraphs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, hosting this show since prior to the 2019 season, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And coming up on today's show, we're going to do a little Mailbag Monday. Mailbag Monday on a Monday. If you were paying attention or around last week, we did Mailbag Monday, not on Monday, not on Tuesday, but on Wednesday. So this week we're back on schedule. And the first question comes from 1985 SF Giants fan, aka NorCal Oscar, who says, after today's start, where do you think Landen Roupp is in the battle for the fifth spot? And I have to just give proper context here. This question was asked certainly not after, this was asked at least a week ago. It was a week plus ago that this question was asked. And so that's the context. And so he's pitched even more. And in fact, he pitched, I think it was yesterday, in a televised game broadcast by the Cubs, and I watched that game, and Landen Roupp, he didn't have his best stuff, and so it was like the first time this spring we kind of saw Landen Roupp, I don't want to say struggle, but he struggled with command, was kind of fighting himself for much of the outing, and yet he still got through it. And then you just look at the spring numbers, he's thrown 12 innings, he's started 4 games, all 4 of his appearances have been starts, which should kind of tell you something about how they view him. And if you just look at the results, I mean, he struck out 30.4% of batters. He's walked just 2.2% of batters. That is, in fact, 1 walk after facing 46 hitters. 1 walk. That's incredible. 2 hit by pitches. And he's given up 1 home run. So, there's just nothing to dislike here. Thank you to Fangraphs for having spring training stats available. And then also, let's just remember that he finished out the 2024 season really, really strong. I believe, and I'm going to be able to pull it up, he made 4 consecutive starts to finish the season in which he had a 3.86 ERA and a 3.49 fielding independent pitching in those 4 starts, 18 2/3 innings, and allowed 8 runs, 1 homer, 14 strikeouts. So the strikeout rate wasn't particularly high, but there's some context here. Andrew Baggerly wrote about Landen Roupp in a recent article in The Athletic, and he basically said the talk of camp last year was Landen Roupp, and the talk of camp this year is Landen Roupp. And so Baggerly said, now for the best part. Last year's spring training head turner is also this spring's head turner. Roupp is the talk of camp again. And this was before yesterday's start. He has allowed 1 hit in 8 1/3 scoreless innings over his 3 starts while striking out 11 and walking 1. He is winning the competition for the number 5 starter role. He is ahead of right-hander Hayden Birdsong, who throws 98 as easily as he brushes his teeth. He is poised to unseat left-hander Kyle Harrison, who entered camp with near to ordained status. Giants pitching coach JP Martinez said, I think he got a taste of it last year, and he had such a good August and September, probably one of the best 6-week runs of any pitcher in the league last year. You can see his maturity and his approach. He's a legitimate threat to be one of our guys. So he says August and September. So instead of me just focusing on the 4 starts, let me just I don't know, remember if he was injured or got sent down, but he pitched June 30th, and then he didn't pitch again until August 9th. So we're going to start with that August 9th call-up or activation. And yeah, he had a 2.38 ERA in 34 innings. And a 3.08 fielding independent pitching. Ground ball rate was high at around 50%. Barely allowed any just 1 home run allowed, and walked 16, which is actually a little high. To have a 3.08 fielding independent pitching with a walk rate that was actually kind of high is impressive, and it has to do mostly with allowing just 1 homer, but that's kind of backed up by the ground ball rate. So also, I was going to look at something else about Landen Roupp's season last year, but it's blanking on me what I was going to look. But Baggerly said Roupp arrived in camp this spring with one more assignment: develop a 4th pitch. And then JP Martinez, Giants pitching coach, said, we knew he could get through a season on a sinker and a curveball if he wanted to, but we really liked the possibility of him throwing a changeup as well as a shorter slider. He's really embraced those pitches this spring. He punched out Xander Bogaerts on the changeup looking earlier this week. He threw a bunch of them versus Seattle in his other start. He's getting really comfortable with that pitch versus lefties and righties, and the slider cutter has shown really well too. So slider cutter being 1 pitch, they're calling it a shorter slider. So he's calling it a slider cutter. And then Martinez continues. So I think he's got a legitimate 4-pitch mix now. And then Baggerly says Roupp went to Logan Webb for advice on tightening up his slider, but credits Garvin Alston for showing him the grip that he used to create a repeatable movement profile. Roupp's curveball remains the separator in his repertoire. Now he feels he has the other pitches to complement the curve and establish count leverage to make the pitch more effective. And then Roupp says, having those 4 pitches is a game changer for me. Of course, my goal is to have 4+ pitches, but the cutter was to keep lefties off my curveball and to show them another pitch, because both of those pitches breaking, this is Ben talking now, in on lefties. And so it's like you can't just sit if something's coming in on you that it's slow. It's something harder. And so he says, I've put away the bigger slider. So he had a curveball and a bigger slider, so both kind of slow, and am going to go cutter full time. So something harder coming in on lefties. And he says, JP Martinez says there's been such an obsession with breaking ball power. Sometimes because they're 75, 76 miles an hour, they get looked at like they don't have power. But Landen's curveball is a really high spin efficiency, big break, big Magnus effect breaking ball. This is some high level talk here. There aren't many guys who can throw that anymore. Charlie Morton, maybe Zach Eflin, Seth Lugo, in our group, Verlander and Birdie, Hayden Birdsong. And then he says, so when you do have it, it can be kind of a carrying tool for you. And then you combine Landen's touch and feel for it, it makes him kind of elite, end quote. And so I just thought all of that was important to mention, because that's not the talk of a group that views him as like a depth piece. This is the talk of, it kind of reminds me of when the Giants were very optimistic about Logan Webb breaking out. I mean, Landen Roupp's curveball is really, really good. There's metrics that can evaluate the quality of stuff and, the quality of pitches. The thing I wanted to look at was how many hits he had allowed, because I know he said So he has now allowed 8 hits. So does that mean he allowed 7 in his last? I don't remember what Baggerly wrote here for how many hits he had allowed. He had allowed. I can't find it. 1 hit. Yeah. So I guess he allowed 7. But still, very impressive spring. Looks to be the favorite in my opinion, and certainly a guy who's going to break camp. It looks like with this team. So coming up in just a minute, we're going to switch our attention to what is the Giants' biggest weakness and how can they address it. We'll get into it in just a minute, and before we do, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by none other than FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple and easy to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly, no waiting around. I'm looking right now, FanDuel March Madness, there's just so many opportunities, and with that intro offer, $200 in bonus bets for new customers when you win your first $5 bet, I would just bet on the most lopsided odds I could find and walk away with 200 in bonus bets. So visit FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, here we go. More questions and answers. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers coming up tomorrow. More action from spring training to give you. And coming up later on in the week, I'm going to be doing, recording our NL West preview. So that's something to look out for. It's not going to, well, it will be on this channel, but it's like going to be a bonus episode, I think. We're going to be talking with all of the NL West hosts, and so that's going to be a lot of fun. So getting back to the questions, the next one comes from Megan Curry, who says, or Megan, maybe, Meegan, who says, what is the Giants' biggest weakness going into the season? How do you think they can address it? And I kind of struggle to pinpoint something in particular, which is not to say that they have no weaknesses. It was just kind of like, you could kind of say it's the veteran rotation options and not knowing what you're going to get out of guys like Justin Verlander, Robbie Ray, and Jordan Hicks. But then I think they've got all this young pitching behind them, like we just talked about. And so I wouldn't call it that. I think some people are kind of underrating their bullpen and how some of these young arms can just slide into the bullpen. Like Kyle Harrison could easily break camp instead of just, oh, you lost the 5th starter job, you're just going to go to AAA. They might want him to, or he could be another lefty out of the bullpen. And they've done that the last several years where they've got multiple guys who can throw like 3-4 innings out of the bullpen. And we could definitely see that again this year. And then I think the lineup is pretty set and solid. There is going to be a question coming up in just a minute about lefties in the lineup. The DH spot is a question mark with Gerard Encarnacion looking like the favorite. That's another question we'll get to later. But I think pretty clearly the biggest weakness is probably when you look at the bench, which is to be determined. It's not obvious who exactly, like there's multiple, I would say every spot except Wilmer Flores' spot is debatable as to who it's going to be, assuming a 4-man bench, which would be 13 position players, 13 pitchers. And you've got to have a backup catcher. It's not going to be Tom Murphy, who quote unquote should be the backup catcher, given that he's the one with a guaranteed contract. It is a small contract, but nonetheless, the Giants sent out a medical update today and pointed out that Tom Murphy, who has a mid-back disc herniation, is getting his 2nd epidural injection this morning here in Arizona. He will be rehab, a little typo there, only for the next 2 weeks. Oh, excuse me, not a typo. He will be rehab only for the next 2 weeks. So, like, no baseball activities. Pardon me, not a typo. So, yeah, so 2 weeks from now is basically the season's going to be starting. And so he's out for that. So the backup, yeah, it's the week of the season starting 2 weeks from now. So there's no way that it'll be Murphy breaking camp. And so you've got Sam Huff with no options left on the 40-man roster. You've got Max Stassi, who was a minor league signing. You've got those are probably the main two candidates there. Huff being out of options and on the 40-man probably has a leg up, but Stassi is, I think, I confuse the two, really well known for his defense, and Huff has more kind of power potential, but maybe not quite as good defensively. And so that's going to be an interesting battle, but I would not call it necessarily a strength. And then Brett Wisely, like, is he making this, like, who's that kind of backup infielder? Is it Brett Wisely, who still has an option year remaining? Is it Casey Schmidt, who has impressed me when I've seen him? Not a lot of games have been televised, but Casey Schmidt hit a booming home run yesterday. He's hitting well this spring. I mean, he's got, in 28 plate appearances, a 429 isolated power. He's hit 3 homers and 3 doubles with 2 singles. So he's made the most of his hits with power. And we know what he can do defensively, but there's no room for him at third base. There's no room for him at short. And then do you want a lefty instead of a righty? And then does that make it Brett Wisely? So they did option Oslavis Basabe, somebody they acquired for cash earlier in the offseason who can play short. And so that backup shortstop spot, Marco Luciano no longer a shortstop, so he's already been optioned. So I think it's either, to me, it looks like Brett Wisely or Casey Schmidt who will take down that job. There is David Villar, but he's out of options, so that's he also can't play shortstop. So I don't think he's the guy, but they're gonna have to do something about him. And then another outfielder. Is it Luis Matos? I think it probably is at this point, when the other options are, I mean, you've got Grant McCray and Wade Meckler also still in camp. Meckler did injure himself in yesterday's game. He was diagnosed with a mild neck strain and concussion. He was reevaluated by team doctors this morning and diagnosed with a mild neck strain and will enter concussion protocol. So that's not great when you're trying to win a job, but at the same time, he crashed hard into the ground on a diving attempt on a deep fly ball, ranging far to his left and back towards the wall. So I would say it's looking like probably Luis Matos to me to start the year, like a platoon with Mike Yastrzemski, just to get Matos playing time. And then hopefully he can break out and kind of seize more of an everyday role. So I think it's the bench, but also I like, Wilmer Flores, it remains to be seen, like, is he last year's version of Wilmer Flores? Is he the previous year's version of Wilmer Flores? Or is he most likely somewhere in between? And I would say somewhere in between, and then he's a solid player to have on your bench and kind of platooning with Lamont Wade. So it's kind of that, the bench has the potential, like, there's upside. Like, Luis Matos has a lot of upside. So they're not a team with, like, glaring huge weaknesses per se, and they have some solid depth. So that being said, there's question marks. You don't know what you're going to get out of some of these guys, especially some of the younger guys, but it's nice that they all have some upside, like a Casey Schmidt and a Luis Matos. And those are the two main guys I'm thinking of right now when I'm talking about the bench. So anyway, the next question is going to come from NDE The Rock, who says this team desperately needs a left-handed bat. Wade can't lead off. Need to trade Wilmer and a young pitcher to bring in a left-handed guy who can hit first or in the middle of the order? So I'm going to answer this aggressively worded question in just a minute and before we get into it. All right, as promised, we're going to answer this question from NDE The Rock about, do the Giants need another left-handed bat? Does this team desperately lack a left-handed bat, as NDE The Rock says? Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. And so when I look at the kind of projected Giants opening day lineup, they're very likely going to face a righty on opening day, probably Hunter Green of the Cincinnati Reds. They're going to be in Cincinnati, and I believe Hunter Green is healthy. And yeah, so that's probably who they'll be facing. Good pitcher, throws hard. And yeah, so the lefties will be on display right away. Yeah, man, this guy had a very good season last year for the Reds. 2.75 ERA, strikeout rate 28%. So it's going to be a tough task from an opposing pitcher standpoint on opening day. But who are the lefties who figure to be in there against a right-handed pitcher? Lamont Wade Jr., very likely to be batting first and being a left-handed hitter on opening day. Jung-Hoo Lee, very likely to be hitting in the middle of the order, probably third left-handed bat on opening day. And then beyond that, I see your point. Mike Yastrzemski is kind of the only other lefty that figures to be in that starting lineup. And so that's three: Wade, Lee, and Yastrzemski, none of whom are Barry Bonds or anything close. Of course, that's an insane comparison to even make. But I understand where you're coming from with this comment. But who are the left? Like, please tell me who is available for, Wilmer. First of all, if you trade Wilmer Flores, Bryce Eldridge, there's your left-handed bat. Let's hope that he starts the season really well in the minors and that he comes up and becomes that fourth left-handed bat in there and can be the force that the Giants hope that he can be. But also Patrick Bailey is better from the left side, and he started last year really well offensively and just completely fell off a cliff late in the year, and it tanked his numbers. But let's not totally sleep on Bailey. Switch hitter, better, at least in his minor league career. From the left side, it's been more even in his major league career, but I think long-term the prognosis or whatever is probably that he'll be better from the left side. So your point is well taken. However, I don't think it's desperate, and I disagree completely with Wade can't lead off. I think he is somewhat of an ideal leadoff hitter, and I'm going to pull up, I think we're just probably fundamentally disagreeing on what's important out of a leadoff hitter. Lamont Wade Jr. has, I think this was pointed out by Ken Rosenthal or someone early on in the offseason, that Wade, because they were talking about trade candidates in the majors and Wade's name was coming up, and they just pointed out that Wade has one of the best on-base percentages in baseball. I can't remember if it was over the last 2 years or the last 4 years. With the Giants, his on-base percentage is .352. And to me, that's the most important quality in a leadoff hitter, is getting on base. Now, others have said, well, just look at his runs scored total, and you'll see that for the Giants, getting on base isn't the most important thing. Now, that's a little bit of a tricky thing to do because runs scored is a counting stat and on-base percentage is a rate stat, and he gets platooned. And so he doesn't play as often as guys who play every day. And also he's missed some time with some injuries, like every year. His plate appearance total in 4 seasons is only 1552, which is, quick math, 1552 divided by 4 is 388 plate appearances a year. So you're not going to put up big counting stats numbers in that case. And the last 2 seasons, by the way, Wade's on-base percentage is .376, which I would venture to say is probably up near the very top in baseball. So yeah, I really actually want to look that up really quick. 2023 to 2024, Wade had 920 total plate appearances. So if we set the minimum to 900 plate appearances and look at the last 2 seasons combined, the on-base percentage leaders go Aaron Judge. Lamont Wade Jr. is 11th without going through the top 10. But if you look at the names around him, these are some of the best players in baseball. Now, I get it. They're hitting for more power. They're playing every day. But nonetheless, 376 on-base percentage is getting it done. And Wade's walk rate of 15% in the last 2 years is 4th best in baseball, minimum 900 plate appearances. And when we say he can't lead off, I don't quite know what exactly that means. Because he does lead off and does it well, in my opinion. So I do just want to pull up the numbers for him as a leadoff hitter, like when he's batting first. So in his career, when batting first in the order, it basically lines up with what he's done anywhere else. Strikeout rate is just 19% batting first. On-base percentage, 344, 17% above average. And this is righties against righties or lefties. If we just say against righties batting first, the numbers look even better, although he hasn't hit leadoff much at all against lefties. So long story short, and if we narrow it down to just his time with the Giants, because he did have some major league experience with the Twins, he's just been good. I don't see. I guess we look at the game somewhat differently, but 347 on base, 444 slugging. That's above average power and above average on base. So I don't understand how the one thing you're not getting is above average speed. So I get it from that perspective, but otherwise there's nothing for me to complain about with Wade hitting leadoff. Question is more, now that Austin Slater is not here, who's that leadoff guy against left-handed pitching? That's to me a really interesting question. And as I look at the roster, probably Tyler Fitzgerald, maybe Elliot Ramos, it's someone unconventional probably. Or they go even more unconventional and they don't platoon Wade and they just keep him in there and they try to make him more of an everyday player. So anyway, I get your point. I think it's unlikely that they trade Wilmer and a young pitcher. At this point, I don't expect any major moves. And also Bryce Eldridge, hopefully, I totally get your point. Be nice to have a lefty in there hitting 38 homers a year, or even 28, just somebody who's a force. And then we can make the same argument with Jung-Hoo Lee, where he's not going to wow you with power, but he's probably going to hit for a high average and a high on base. And that it doesn't really matter how you get there. It's about run production comes in different forms, and getting on, not making outs is the best thing you could do. And obviously somebody needs to drive those guys in. And you've got some guys like righties who aren't bad against righties in Chapman, Adames, potentially Elliot Ramos, not sure, but Chapman and Adames for sure, who can handle their own against righties and hopefully drive in these lefties when they're on. And we also don't know, maybe Jung-Hoo Lee is not really a splits guy because he makes so much contact that he's not a platoon player. So we'll see. There's not enough of a sample to know how good he's going to be against lefties in the majors, but hopefully he can hold his own and then some and just be good against both lefties and righties. All right, next question comes from Joe G, who says, what do you think about the River Cats playing in Oakland until the A's leave? Or is there a chance they would ever change affiliations, maybe like the Ballers, maybe make the Ballers their AAA team? So to me, I think that it's a benefit to the River Cats that they'll be playing in Oakland until the A's leave. Excuse me. Whoa. I totally misread this question. What do I think about the River Cats playing in Oakland? That facility is not as nice as the one they have in Sacramento. And that's kind of in large part why the A's are leaving Oakland and playing in Sacramento, even when they're ultimately going to Vegas. So I don't like the benefit of staying in Sacramento is that facility has been upgraded to accommodate major league teams. And so they've done renovations. I'm not like ultra familiar with exactly what they've done, but it's been upgraded to accommodate Major League Baseball. And so if you're a AAA team, then you are going to benefit from this. You're going to get probably what I would imagine is a better clubhouse, opposing team. Like you might have the nicest AAA stadium around because it's also a major league stadium for 3 years is the plan for the A's. And so I don't see why the Giants would want to move. I get it. Oakland is closer to San Francisco, so that would be, I don't know if there's any team that would have a closer AAA affiliate, but I don't know. I don't see them needing or wanting to leave. And so I think they're likely to just stay there and benefit from the facility being upgraded. That's just my thoughts on that without having dug into it too much. I do want to look into what exactly kind of upgrades did they do to that stadium to make it major league ready for this season and the next 3 seasons. And then it hopefully would stay that way. And so it might be just a great park for the long term. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast with hosts Dominic Martino and Matthew Anay. MLB fantasy draft season is here. Be the most informed fan and set yourself up for a league win. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X or Blue Sky at Ben Kaspick or at benkaspick.com on Blue Sky. And the Blue Sky thing throws me off from whatever else I normally say there. But we're here for you every day. Everydayers tomorrow coming up. You know, we got another show. We're back to Monday through Friday, and we will have the latest for you from spring training. So anyway, thank you so much to everyone who asked these questions on Mailbag Monday. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. We're just over 2 weeks away from the season getting going. I'm very excited. So thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.